Generations Bank has been serving the financial needs of the Finger Lakes region since 1870. Generations combines the best of modern banking with dedication to the local community. Visit them at mygenbank.com. Generations Bank, member FDIC, and equal housing lender.
All right, everybody, welcome into Concrete Jungle, a New York baseball podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. Paul Russo and Kyle Evans here with you. Going to be interesting podcast today. We're kind of talking a little bit off air, Kyle. I feel like at this point, the Yankees, we don't have an overall ton to actually talk about in terms of like in-game stuff because they just kind of continue to handle their business and go about things as they have all year. For the Mets, a little bit different, unfortunately, obviously. So we'll get to all that. There's been a lot of player movement and updates on both sides, so we'll get to that. Touch on some Rochester and Syracuse stuff, and I'll handle one bit of housekeeping note here as well. We're on iHeartRadio now for podcasts, so you can check us out over there in addition to Spotify for podcasters, YouTube, and a couple other platforms that we're on. So it's all coming up here for us here at Concrete Jungle. But Kyle, how's the week been for you so far?
It's been pretty good. It's always good when my team just keeps winning. What a difference a year makes. I mean, remember last year was tough. My birthday was last Friday, so that was kind of fun. The Yankees got a win that night, and yeah, it's been great. I really can't complain with how things are going.
There you go. So yeah, let's begin with the Yankees. Like I said, there's not a ton to really talk about in terms of like really some in-game stuff. They take the series in Tampa Bay. They will at least take the series here against Minnesota, and they'll end up losing that last game against Houston last week, that Thursday. But I mean, all things considered, kind of the predictions that we had just kind of came true for this past week. You know, I do want to give some shout outs here, and justifiably so, if we're going to do some in-game stuff, which we got to touch on anyway. Luis Hill, Clark Schmidt both looked really great in the past two outings. I know Schmidt was the one that we had some worries about, admittedly. You know, and things have looked really well for him. Obviously, Luis Hill's looked really well to the point that he's kind of starting to get a little bit of some attention from the quote-unquote outside world a little bit. It's been interesting kind of see, I guess, the bigger talking heads kind of talk about him a little bit more. Carlos Rodon, first time in his Yankee career, he goes back-to-back wins. Obviously, you know, it's not like he had this back-to-back loss or anything like that in that sense, but just the way everything shook out. But Rodon continues how well he's done. Stroman as well. I think the only blemish really this past week was Nestor's outing, but I'm not concerned, obviously, given what he's done just collectively as a whole all year. So all is well on that front. And before I toss it over to you, Kyle, the one name we have not discussed really a ton on here this year, and I have not seen discussed a ton as well collectively, we should probably give some flowers to Luke Weaver. He's done really well in the bullpen for the Yankees. You know, and it's been pretty interesting because, you know, if you follow the Yankees on, I guess really TikTok is where I've noticed it the most, where they do, you know, the player questions and stuff like that, where, you know, a lot of these pro teams do it now. Luke Weaver tends to have like a lot of the funnier moments on there, and he's looking to be, I guess, kind of like one of these cult guys in a way. I think for the Yankees, they always tend to usually have one on the roster any given year of sort. I know. I mean, it depends how far you want to go back and stuff like this, right? But like, and I guess it's levels of good too. But like, Matsui was that way, Swisher was that way. You know, and it's just kind of like one of those things now where Luke Weaver might be kind of that guy in a way in this new kind of TikTok age of sorts. So, but in terms of on the field stuff, and look, me and you were on here in the offseason talking about like, why are they bringing Luke Weaver back? maybe they knew something we clearly did not, because he's been, we talked about a lot of these pieces in the bullpen working out really well. He might be the second or third best out of that whole group right now in terms of how well he's done all year and consistently done it all year.
Yeah, for sure. He's been used several more times in high leverage situations. This was a guy that was stretched out in spring training to give multiple innings, but
Right.
he did last night. But there's times this year where he's gone just that one high leverage eighth inning spot, and man, he's been really good. His pitch mix has been very good. Yeah, it's great to have. He hasn't allowed a run in 17.1 innings this season. That's unreal. It's like the third longest scoreless streak among relievers.
Crazy.
So yeah, he's been a pleasant surprise, and I like it because when they gave him $2 million, I was like, wow, they're gonna put this guy in the rotation, and then they got Stroman, and I'm like, oh, thank God. But yeah, he's found his new role, and hopefully he continues that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, I go back to something I said last week. It's probably good to have the situation for the Yankees this year where, and we'll get to this kind of now a little bit, right? Guys are coming back. They're going to have this issue of like, okay, who's going to be on, men out? It's good to have that issue, I guess, for the Yankees this time around. Like I mentioned, there's just not a ton to really talk about in terms of anything bad and good that we kind of haven't already said. A lot of kind of the usual guys in the lineup have really clicked. I think the only thing really kind of sticks out to me was Soto kind of in this mini slump of sorts. And even then, everybody around him isn't. So it's like, okay, like, not a big deal. And I think that's kind of like one of the nicer things about kind of, you mentioned, right, Kyle, like this time last year, we were talking about like, what's this team actually going to be? Like, what's their identity at this point? And fast forward to this year with them, and it's like, oh, he's in a little bit of a slump. No worries. Rizzo's come around. Judge is finding his swing once again clearly here. Like, the guys directly around him in the lineup, Verdugo, those guys they're not struggling, so it's not like a big deal. It's a nice issue to kind of overlook in a sense.
Yeah, and then Anthony Volpe's finally getting hot again, 8-game hitting streak. Yeah, just a well-balanced lineup that, when their superstar player struggles, they have other guys that'll pick it up, and that's what great teams are. And then another note that the Yankees are only one of 3 teams that have 6 different players with at least 20 RBIs. That just shows how balanced it is right there. And one of them being Oswaldo Cabrera, who hits 8th or 9th in the lineup. I mean, that's some great production from the bottom of your order there. And I thought the catchers, too, have been really great.
Yeah.
Austin Wells is hitting a little more. Jose Trevino's really surprised me after the way he started. So, yeah, I mean, things are just going real well. With a win today, they're suddenly, 15 games above 500?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to be a Yankee at the moment. Let's touch on, like I mentioned, there's not really a ton to talk about game-wise, but there's a lot to get to on the player update front. Begin with Tommy Kahnle. Struck out the side on 10 pitches for Somerset Double-A on Tuesday. Rested yesterday. Plan is to pitch him again today. Rest tomorrow. Pitch again Saturday. And then per Aaron Boone, they'll make a decision to activate after Saturday, but it kind of seems like as long as everything kind of just goes off without a hitch in the grand scheme of it for him, Tommy Kahnle should be back on the Yankee roster within the next, what I will call 7 days as a safeguard.
Yeah, he's thrown 3 scoreless innings, hasn't allowed a hit, hasn't allowed a walk, 6 strikeouts. He said after the game that he feels ready, but he knows he has to get through 2 more. So yeah, no doubt. I think maybe by Monday he'll be back, if not Tuesday.
Yeah.
Give him a couple days off after that rehab assignment.
Yeah, so good stuff there. Again, one of the guys that we actually, if there has been worries, it was kind of him, just so it kind of extended out a little bit and stuff like that. Speaking of, DJ LeMahieu took a few live at-bats Tuesday. I was given the number 4 and 5 in terms of actual bats at the complex in Tampa. Stuff got hindered, though. Nothing on LeMahieu's front, luckily. It was just weather-related. Kind of caused him not to be able to even get some defensive drills in down there at the complex. But all things considered, Aaron Boone said he's going to be coming back up to New York here when the Yankees return back home this weekend. So we're looking at a rehab assignment getting restarted again for DJ here within the next probably few days of some sort. Would guess that they'll probably try and give him some live at-bats again, though, before that as more or less a safeguard on his front. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now because Glaber all of a sudden is hitting 400 in his last
Yeah.
2.5 games. So, and then you're, I guess, gonna platoon with Oswaldo. I mean, I guess, but like Oswaldo's been nice this year, so I don't know. I just don't really know about bringing him back and then just kind of killing the chemistry that's going on right now. But
Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. I mean, he didn't do bad, all things considered. He got more reps last year in the outfield, but could Trent Grisham be the odd man out at this point?
I think
I
he's
mean,
got to.
it could be. I don't want to be that guy, but it could be.
Yeah.
So, but that's for, I guess, a podcast here down
Jahmai
the line.
Jones.
Yeah, and even then, like, he's been a nice spot off the bench, though, for the Yankees. Like,
And they barely played him.
right. Yeah. Got his first home run a couple days ago, too, even. Like, you know. Man, decisions. Like I said, it's a good problem to have. Oswald Peraza transferred to Double-A Somerset to continue his rehab assignment. However, the way they're building him back up, we're still talking multiple weeks until we see him at the big league level again. And even then, we kind of mentioned like the roster spot issue. He could be back on the 40-man, but you know, could he be kind of a guy, unfortunately, who's just kind of stuck at Scranton because of just the numbers don't make sense for him to be at the big league level, you know, on the 26-man active roster? I don't know. I think a lot of it might depend on kind of exactly that, how well he actually kind of does in these rehab assignments.
Yeah, and I don't like the idea of these young kids coming up and not playing every day.
Right.
Like for him, I think that would be terrible for him.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you.
Regular bats in the minor leagues, and I don't know. At some point, maybe is he a trade piece for a big time acquisition at the deadline?
Yeah.
Because you know they're not going to. I think the Yankees are going to be aggressive this trade deadline.
Yeah. Yeah, I think based off of, not to get too far ahead of what we're going to be talking about here, but I think it's going to be a very, what I would call active deadline, to probably put it mildly, the way it's kind of shaping up to be. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting kind of see how it all goes with Oswald. Good news here. We mentioned a little bit last week, Jason Dominguez beginning his rehab assignment, went 1 for 3 in his first game with Tampa on Tuesday at the single-A level. Aaron Boone said it's going to be designated hitting for this first couple of weeks before kind of getting him back to the outfield a little bit here. Obviously, with coming off of Tommy John, which is still weird to say for a position player, but obviously good news on that front. I believe it was an RBI single too, if I recall right, but I could be slightly off. But for the Martian,
It was just a single off Domingo Herman.
gotcha.
Yeah, Domingo Herman was pitching in single A.
For Bradenton,
Yep.
wow. Okay then, we have followed into a weird timeline.
Yep. Threw a what was it, a no hitter last year, and then
Perfect game,
perfect game. Sorry,
not just a no-no, perfect game.
perfect game.
Oh
And then all of a sudden he's pitching in single A. What, 8 months later?
Well, not to be that guy, but you know, you take yourself out of doing what you do every day for your own, and justifiably so, rehabilitation. You're probably going to need to be built back up a little bit. So, okay. Anyway, back awkwardly transition here. Speaking of former Pirates or current Pirates, Garrett Cole threw about 36 pitches, an odd number to have a rough number on, but down in Tampa on Tuesday. Much like DJ LeMahieu returning back to New York here with the team as they come back home off of this mini road trip. I don't expect a rehab assignment exactly as soon as, like, say, DJ LeMahieu, but all signs are pointing pretty good with Garrett. Both himself, Boone, and the rest of the team are pretty happy with where he's sitting. I saw sitting at about 89, 90 on this fastball for velocity, which is where they want it to be at this current stage. So all things appear pretty good on his front on getting the program built up and hopefully starting a rehab process here within the next few weeks.
My early thoughts, even though we're still a ways away, is what's going to happen when he does return. I have this weird feeling that Nestor goes to the bullpen,
Really?
or they send Luis Heel to the bullpen, even though he's been so great, because they're worried about his innings, and it's only May.
Maybe.
Well, it'll be June probably when Cole's back.
Right.
But I think if you're taking the weaker person out of that rotation right now, it is Nestor. And you're not just going to, like, I don't know, no options, I'm sure, right?
No, not for him at this point.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. So, I mean, I doubt I see them just, like, completely moving on from him. So I feel like they would just send him to the pen.
See, I feel like Clark Schmidt might be the odd man out.
I don't know.
He's still having a little bit of that issue when he gets beyond the fifth inning, man. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a tough decision, I think, no matter what. But that's great. I mean, last year, these guys would have came back that we're all talking about, just went right back in the lineup. Because, I mean, we had Billy McKinney, Willie Calhoun.
Disrespect.
Like, oh my God, was that bad. It's so nice to actually have talent.
Fair. The disrespect to Billy McKinney. I don't know if I'll allow that one. Willie, I'll allow. But,
Jake Bowers.
okay, now you're crossing the line.
Jeez.
Brewer legend. Another former Pirate, J.T. Brubaker. People may have forgotten that the Yankees did acquire him from the Pirates. Targeting the All-Star break for his return to the big leagues, he actually went against DJ LeMahieu at the complex in Tampa for a live at bat. So it's going to be interesting too. I don't know exactly how he's going to fit into the fold. Obviously, he's a starter by trade, as I'll call it. But he could be a guy that, we kind of talk about maybe a little bit of that Luke Weaver role where he's the extended guy this year where it's like he just will eat up innings in the bullpen and kind of let it go. He was acquired for cash, right? Cash PT.
Yep.
So, who knows? Maybe he just also becomes, maybe they throw him for a little bit. He becomes a bit of trade bait or something. I don't know what his exact role is going to be, but another arm for the Yankees is kind of progressing along, which is good to see.
It seems like they have so many arms,
Yeah.
and they're going to have a problem because there's only so many that can go in the bullpen.
Correct.
I mean, even Ron Marinaccio, they sent him down, and the guy was awesome when he got called back up. I think he only allowed one run, if not no runs, and they send him down, and then what's his name is still in the bullpen. What's that guy's name? The guy that I don't like, that came from the Mets. Tonkin.
Oh, yeah.
How the I almost just
Tonkin
went
doesn't have
off.
an earned run, though, for the Yankees.
How the
though.
heck is he still in this game?
He doesn't have an earned run with the Yankees, though, man.
Okay, technically, because it was an extra innings with the runner in second, but in Milwaukee, he was
I'm
terrible.
just saying.
I mean, the guy's got to go. There's your easy opening for Tommy Kahnle.
I mean, it's
My
definitely
Lord.
probably him, right?
And can we get Scott Efros back, man?
Well,
Late summer?
I had a quasi update on him, but I didn't think it was worth throwing it in there. But it was just like,
Still throwing bullpens.
well, yeah, I mean, all it was just like everything is looking good for him. I was like, oh, okay, like.
Lou Trevini, I don't really care about.
Yeah, I mean, this one's a little bit of a tough one, just given the fact that we haven't seen him now in pretty much a year and a half, right?
Terrible trade.
He's been shut down for 3 to 4 weeks with elbow inflammation, obviously in that right elbow. Met with the team and Dr. Neil, I always mispronounce his name. I've heard Atrashi now again.
Elatrosh.
Thank you. They did imaging, show no additional damage, so they're just going to wait it out here for the next month, I guess, and kind of go from there. But yeah, I mean, the disastrous Frankie Montas Lou Trevino trade is lingering here still in the wind. Moving on from that, Yankees, as I mentioned, they still got the game against Minnesota today, Thursday afternoon, and then they get 3 games back at home against the Chicago White Sox, and then the Seattle Mariners come into town for a 4-game set after that, and then the Yankees actually head west, looking way ahead next weekend. They're out in San Diego, so
I'm excited. Late night baseball, love it.
especially on a weekend, nothing better that time of year. And actually, it's kind of crazy to say it. Like, that series is over Memorial Day weekend. So we have chugged right along. We're almost at the 2-month mark of the season already. So I don't want to get too big here. Like, the White Sox are just such a mess. The Mariners, I can't get a really great gauge on the Mariners just yet, but they're kind of getting their act together. So the 4-game series for them frightens me in the sense that, like, I could very well see that being just a 2-2 split, as much as I could being like seeing the Yankees get 3 of 4. I don't really go here often, obviously, Kyle, as you know. I think the Yankees sweep the White Sox. I mean, I don't really, man. It's one of those things. I think it's Brad Keller's got 1 game, I think, for the White Sox. I think it's Chris flexing for another. I don't know who's got the third game. It's just
Well, what if I told you they've won 2 in a row and they're 6-4 in their last 10?
don't care.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think I said it last week. I think they're going to sweep the Twins today, and then I guess back-to-back sweeps, and then I'll say 3 of 4 against Seattle. Seattle's just been too inconsistent. Their offense.
By the way, not to interrupt, I forgot about the proper term for a 4-game sweep. Forgot about it. We're calling it the mop. So you're saying that they'll mop the Twins.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, okay, so we're pretty much on the same kind of plane here, I guess, for the next 7 days after.
Yeah.
I don't know. The White Sox are just, man, cool. They've won 6 of 4, but like, I don't know. I can't see for the White Sox. The 3-game run they had was absurd. I saw the stats on it. I was just like, Jesus. But like, look, they're going to be selling. I think this might be an opportunity for the Yankees to get a close-up look on a couple guys that might intrigue them. So, I don't know. I'm just happy that they missed. In all honesty, there is one guy I'm happy that they missed pitching-wise in this matchup, Garrett Crochet, and I'm very happy that the Yankees don't have to face him because that dude can deal.
Yeah, they got a sweep, just like they swept the Marlins. Shouldn't have split with the Athletics, but whatever.
Those pesky Athletics. All right, let's get over here to the Mets. I mean, a miserable 7 days for them, to be quite honest. Lose the series against the Braves. And they are on the verge of, despite it not being a true 4-game series, as I call it last week, I'm kind of classifying it as this 4-game series against the Phillies, even though it was a 2-2. They're on the verge of getting mopped by the Phillies. It has just not been good. It's one of those things where it's like, if one thing is going well for them in a game, the opposite is not. I mean, the opening game against Philly, for example, the bullpen just implodes in the 9th. It's been for a little bit now with this team. I think part of it I want to table for when we discuss the Steve Cohen stuff. It's just one of those things for me where I look at him and I'm just like, maybe I am going to have a little bit of buyer's remorse for considering them at least a playoff contender. And look, there's still plenty of time. I don't want to make it sound like it's like they're done, but like the fact of the matter is, like in the past, you look at the past 6-7 days where it's like, oh God, like they've been one of the worst teams in baseball in that stretch. It's like, this is not good, especially with the talent they still got on that roster to a degree. Like, it's just, you can't be having that baseball being played the way that they've played it. I don't think there's a way around it at this point.
Yeah, and then they have all these like setbacks and injury news that are surrounding the team, especially with some of the pitching, and it's just like
which we'll get to because I got to take about one of them.
yeah, and then just so many roster moves, definitely more than the Yankees. Guys that are coming back for third and fourth stints, and then just getting DFA'd again. I don't know. It looks tough right now. That Sunday night walk-off win from Brandon Nimmo was like probably the only bright spot over the last week because they rallied, and I don't know. There's just not a whole lot of positives right now.
And even then, like for Nimmo, and I don't want to take away from like that's a guy who kind of needed that moment, but it's just like, okay, you have that one moment with Nimmo, and it's like, then what? Right? Because like literally the next day they go out, they're in a spot where, you know, it would have been a really good win for them against this Phillies team, and they implode in the 9th. You know, and they just can't seem to string it together, even on one side of the ball. It's like one day it's the offense doing really good, and it's the pitching not. And then the next day it's the pitching doing really good, and then it's the offense not. It's kind of, I guess, almost in a way like we talked about like this with the Yankees at this time last year. It's kind of like the same thing in a weird way. Almost worse though at this point, because I think for the Mets, you know, there's still this reasonable expectation going into this year of being competitive, right? And it just has not been the case this year. And I think that kind of leads in well to the Steve Cohen thing. You know, I forget the article exactly, but he replies more or less to this article on Twitter about the Mets right now and their situation and kind of the broader scheme, right, of baseball coming up here at the trade deadline, which is still over 2 months away, but ever looming, right? And Steve more or less alluded to the fact that like the Mets would probably be sellers at the deadline in this tweet. He said, well, you know, wait and see what we do at the deadline here. And he since went on to delete the tweet. You know, if that's a position of him, and I get it, right? Like he came out and he has talked a very big game for what he expects and what he wants to do with this team. And, you know, and I guess what now, the 2.5 years of ownership for him, it's been, for the most part, a backfire. And if I'm looking at this, and I'm actually going to go beyond the trade deadline, even on this, admittedly. If I'm an impending free agent and I see that the owner is more or less waving the white flag already, do you want to go there? Because I wouldn't. And it's one of those things, it's kind of funny. Me and you actually talked about this a little bit a while ago in a different sports sense, but like, certain teams you know are not going to be title championship contenders, that happens in sport, right? But you don't actually go out there and just kind of like go through the paces to go through the paces, right? Like you still go out there, you compete, you expect to go out and win every game that you go out and do. Like what's the point of competition if that's not the case? But if I'm viewing this at this point, I'm just like, this is just not it. And I mean, if you're the Mets too, like this is a big year for the organization. I mean, you know, Pete Alonso's in this contract year. If I had to guess right now, he's not coming back. If I had to guess. You know, and this is a team that has struggled for true homegrown talent pretty much their whole existence in some way, right? Like, I remember Don LaGreca, oh man. It had to be at least 5 years ago, because I remember being pre-2020, ranting about this, right? Like, who's the greatest Met of all time? Who was actually a Met? And like the only one he could really come up with was Ed Kranepool back in the 60s and 70s. And it's just like, God, like that's just like miserable. And he's right to a degree. I don't know if I'd go that far. I'd probably lean David Wright, but like he has a good point, right? Like Tom Seaver left and you know, he wanted to come back to the Mets and they kind of shunned him away. So that's gone, right? Nolan Ryan gone. Way back in there too as well, but like Darryl Strawberry, Jack Gooden, right? They didn't end their careers in a Mets uniform. Quite the opposite. You know, the end of their careers were highlighted by being a Yankee. You know, for as great as David Wright was, his body couldn't help itself, right? And alongside him, Jose Reyes, the first minute he got a taste of free agency, he was gone. So if you're the Mets, like I don't know, man, and they got the right guy at the helm still with David Stearns, in my opinion, at GM, but man, for Cohen to kind of come out like this, and I've seen people talk actually and kind of be on his side, and I'm like, I really disagree. I don't think that's someone an owner should be saying. I don't think that's anybody from any organization should be saying. I get it. You are probably going to be sellers to some degree, but like, you don't just kind of say it like that, you know? Just bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, we're 44 games in.
That's the other part about it, too.
It's May 16th. They're only one game out of a wild card spot. Yes, they're not going to probably win the division. I would actually probably put that at like 98%. But yeah, to sit here and tweet that out as the owner is a bad look for everything. I mean, the fans obviously went crazy. Most of them, you said a few of them like backed him up, but the offense is really the issue this year. I mean, they're 20th in runs scored,
Yeah.
17th in home runs.
They just collectively have not been good.
20th in batting average. It's literally the Yankees' offense last year. And their pitching, has struggled lately, but the pitching had been so good in the first month and a half, and they did get above 500. They had a pretty decent West Coast trip. And then since then, it's just everything has fallen apart, and guys just are getting hurt. Guys that are hot aren't playing, as we talked about with Harrison Bader before. DJ Stewart's still playing too much, in my opinion. He had a couple good games mixed in, but if you look at his offensive numbers overall, JD Martinez should probably have more than 2 home runs because he was their power guy, and he didn't hit that until the other day. So, yeah, just stuff isn't going right on offense, and when you're not scoring runs, as we saw with the Yankees, no matter how good your pitching is, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And this is what they're doing.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned it, too, a little bit ago, and, we'll go to this side of it, too, with updating stuff. They have made a flurry of moves here in the past week where it's like, oh, my gosh, like, what are they doing to some of these guys, in a sense? Get on the health side of it first here. Brooks Raley, not the best news in the world. He has a UCL strain. He'll rest for this next 2 weeks. And then start a throwing program. If that doesn't go well, or if it goes well, he will be back on the Mets roster at some point this season. If it doesn't go well, we're talking Tommy John or an internal brace having to be put into his left elbow. Not the best news for one of their best relievers. Just a tough spot, and a guy who really shone bright last year in his first, I guess, really full chance of having a full season of work, and now it's looking like no matter what, it's some sort of wasted year at least for Raley. In addition, Drew Smith was expected to be activated from the injured list this past Tuesday. However, in the morning, playing catch, experienced what was called a pinch in his right shoulder, his throwing shoulder, and he doesn't have a return date now, unknown, but the Mets and him, they won't want to do some imaging and testing right now. They're just going to kind of work through it and kind of see what happens, but for a couple of their really bigger relievers at certain points throughout the past year, not the news they needed for either of those two. Let's see what else we got here before the fun stuff, as I call it. Good news, Tyler Magle expected to rejoin the Mets rotation on Monday. He's looked really good in his rehab assignments so far. And then this is where stuff gets pretty weird in my... Oh, actually, I'll do this one first before getting to the weird stuff. Kodai Senga. You mentioned it, Kyle. You alluded to it a little bit here. Has experienced a setback coming back from that what is a shoulder issue. He's going back to working on his mechanics after live BP and stuff did not go as planned. And to me, this would be the biggest blow for the Mets this year, very clearly. Don't know if you feel exactly the same, but the way this whole timeline for Senga has gone this year has been one of, and for me, confusion, because it's the off season. I don't know how you have dead arm coming off of the off season and the way that he did. In that sense, we since learned it's a bigger, deeper shoulder issue, and it just has seemed like his throwing program, I think it's somewhere in the middle, what I'm going to call between himself, his team, and the Mets, just has not been on the same page, and now it's caused a setback where the expectation was sometime in June he'd be back. Now it's looking like who knows when he'll be back. It's just a baffling, confusing, awful, but to me, just more confusing situation than anything else with him.
Yeah, it's definitely a big blow. But I look at it this way. Garrett Cole had a Cy Young season. Was clearly the number one pitcher in the league, and the Yankees still missed the playoffs because of their offense was just that bad. This is how I kind of look at it with this team. Yeah, Kodai Senga would be great to have right now, and and stuff like that, but they still would lose a ton of games because their offense has been so bad. So I think no matter how good the pitching is, even when we saw in the beginning of the season with them, they were still losing because their offense was so inconsistent. And until that gets fixed, I just don't think much will change.
I'll counterpoint it to a degree here. You're right on the Garrett Cole thing with the Yankees last year, but that team when Aaron Judge went down was not the same team. Right?
Yeah.
Kodai Senga, to some degree, is some sort of leader within that clubhouse. I don't know to what degree, but it's very clearly he was some sort of leader within there. And I don't know how much he's really exactly around the team right now. Like, this is what I mean by, like, it just seems like there is some sort of murkiness going on in my mind between himself and his personal team and the Mets. Like, there's something going on throughout this rehab process, not assignment. And now we have this setback, and now the timeline for him to come back is more or less, frankly, reset, because who knows what it's going to look like now.
Maybe next year.
Right, but that's the point, right? Like, the guy who was their, frankly, at this point, right, their biggest acquisition last offseason, because the other guys aren't there anymore already, you know, for him to have a wasted year like this, and now the worry becomes, like, what's his future actually like at after this? Because we've seen, and I hate phrasing it this way, but it's true, we've seen players, and specifically the pitchers from Japan, when they have these injury issues, they come back and have to retool their game. And, you know, not to go to the Yankee well on this, but you look at Tanaka, you know, he completely kind of changed the way he approached the game, and it ended up working well for his career, to be quite honest with you, in New York. But it's either you have, like, the success stories of, like, Tanaka, or you have guys who get burned kind of out like Hideo Nomo did, in a way back in the day. So I don't know. I feel like I just have more questions than I will ever have answers for this situation. I think for me that's the frustrating part as a baseball fan in this, you know, where it's just like, how is this kind of happening at this point? Like, I feel like there's just too much question marks surrounding the whole entire thing on this now at this point, that, you know, the baseball element is kind of out the window with him. I don't know.
Yeah, we're going on like 2 months since Carlos Mendoza said he was, you know, going to be shut down from throwing, and then, you know, we hear he's on his way back, and then, like you said, all this live BP stuff, and then all of a sudden now he's not ready because he needs to work on mechanics, and there's no timeline. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard that before.
Yeah.
Usually when a guy is just not going right, you just keep throwing him in games and in the minors, and eventually when his clock runs out, you bring him back.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It like I said, it infuriates me as a baseball fan, because, like, he's such a fun guy to watch. He was last year, and now it's obviously his team's getting robbed. The fans are getting robbed. We're all collectively getting robbed.
Frank is not happy.
I've seen he's going through it right now with a couple.
He's got to give up on the season tickets. They don't deserve his hard-earned money.
Friend of the pod. All right, now let's get to the weird stuff here. So Shintaro Fujinami, who Mets brought in this offseason on the 40-man roster, was pitching with Syracuse all year so far, dealing with right shoulder inflammation. So the Mets recalled him to the big league level to place him on the 15-day injured list. And the way it seems is he will be placed on the 60-day injured list to free up a 40-man spot. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, as I call it, because here we go. Jose Budo, option to AAA Syracuse. This came after his start this week against Philly. Yohan Ramirez, who they just brought in, and Joey Wendell, who that experiment just did not go well, were both designated for assignment. Grant Hartwig, Joey Lucchesi, who pitched yesterday and got rocked by Philly, and Mark Vientos was finally recalled from Syracuse. I guess from the Fujinami thing all the way down, what the hell? It's one of those things for the Mets where it's like I kind of feel, and this goes back to, I think, some of the Cohen remarks, like, are they just kind of doing a weird, like, what they perceive to be Hail Mary thing here right now in the middle of May? Like, I don't know. The interesting one to me, though, is the Fujinami one, because I actually saw him in Rochester a couple weeks ago, and he got rocked out of the bullpen. But, that's the kind of stuff we talk about, like, I feel like in the NHL more or less, where we have that manipulation of the injured list and injury reports and stuff like that. Here's looking at you, Mark Stone in Vegas. But it's pretty interesting. So I feel like the Mets, they either have somebody lingering here in the minors who, admittedly, I don't know who exactly it could be, or they're kind of just opening up the roster spot. The one name we haven't talked about, and it's because he's been working through his rehab process, and there's just nothing really to exactly report on, is David Peterson, who we're looking like probably still another couple starts at the very least for him before he's ready to come back to the big league roster. But, he was on the 60-day injured list, so maybe it's just kind of his spot to come back at this point. I don't know, but definitely some sort of manipulation of sort to get that roster spot opened.
Yeah, the problem with the Mets is they love to pick up these bums, man. Grant Hartwig, he was terrible last night or the night before. Yohan Ramirez, at least third stint this year with the team, being called up. That's what I'm talking about. Mark Vientos was called up at the end of April, sent back down 3 days later, and now is called back up. Like, how many times are you going to mess with his development?
Right.
And, like, not play him every day?
And by the way, not to interrupt, but now the thing with Vientos that comes into this portion of it is he's starting to run out of options. Like, I think he's got 2 more in the bank. I could be wrong, but this is his 5th call-up. Like, I know the number is usually 6, but there's the service time stuff that comes into it, so I think he has 2 left. I could be wrong, but yeah, if you're the Mets, like, that's a guy you can't be doing that with anyway in the first place. So, like, what the hell?
You're messing with his head, too, mentally. I mean, he's probably thinking, like, oh, when am I going to get sent down again? Because he's only been up a day and a half. And then he's going to start platooning, Carlos Mendoza said, with Brett Beatty. Like, oh, so Brett Beatty's going to sit.
Been one of your consistent hitters, too, all year.
Yeah, Beatty's going to sit one night, and then you're just going to keep rotating, like, with your 2 young guys. Like, I mean, if Steve Cohen is basically waving the flag already, then why aren't the kids playing?
Yeah.
Find spots for them. And if you need to trade away these veteran players at the deadline, then you better do it.
Yeah.
Like Bader, is he going to be shipped out of here because he isn't even playing every day?
Right.
I don't know. They just have some interesting decisions to make, and I'm just shocked that DJ Stewart is still getting regular at bats.
Yeah, I don't know. If there was a get-right series here, it might be this weekend for the Mets. So after they get done with the Phillies today, they head to Miami for 3 games. It doesn't get easier, though, after that, because then, they go to Cleveland for a series, a very good Cleveland team this year. So who knows what kind of lays in store for that. I kind of view it as some sort of, in all honesty, probably 500 week here in the next 7 days for the Mets. Kind of a case where I think they take the series to Miami, but then drop it in Cleveland, obviously. So I kind of view it as like a 3-3 week type deal. But I think a lot of it depends, if they just can't get out of the gate here in this series and set the tone against Miami, and say they lose the series to Miami, I'm not saying panic yet, because obviously we're mid-May still at that point. It's still early enough in the year, but we talk about the White Sox. The Marlins are just as bad in that sense, right? And you can't be looking bad against those kind of teams right now, And if that's the case, I won't be surprised if we're back in these seats, next week, and I'm like, oh, the Mets had another 1-6, 1-5 week,
Yeah, I'm going to say they lose to the Marlins.
Really?
They only get 1 game. I know it's going to be real bad because the Marlins are that bad, although somehow I know it's only 2 games, but they've won 2 in a row.
Yeah.
So I guess they're making progress.
You get 1 more, it's a winning streak.
And then Cleveland, I think they're in trouble. I think they get swept.
Yeah.
Did you know who the hottest team in baseball is right now?
Well, it's not the Texas
There's a
Rangers.
team with the
It's not
longest winning streak
It's
right
not the
now.
Texas Rangers. I know that. Definitely not Ronel Blanco. That's right. I had to take my shot while I could. Oh. No, actually, no, it's not. Never mind. Is Colorado actually?
7 straight. That's wild. They were 8-28.
Oh God.
Won 7 in a row. They're 15-28.
Somehow Bud Black just fighting for his life and keeping
Only
his
5.5
job.
out of a wild card spot.
Wow.
Let's go Rockies.
Wild. Yeah, I should have known that right away because I saw them like just putting up like some absurd numbers against San Diego the past couple days. I'm like, what in the hell? Like,
Yep.
But,
7-3 in their last 10.
hey. So they've won 7 straight but lost 3 straight before it.
Yep.
I love baseball. All right, before we get out of here, quick touch on the Red Wings and Syracuse. Both teams are home this week, so I know the weather is looking mostly good-ish. I know the rain's kind of been playing some weird tricks on us lately here in upstate New York, but get out if you can. Red Wings rocking those lilac jerseys and hats this week, looking great. By the way, they got Buffalo. For them, Matt Barnes, Richard Blyer were granted their free agency and release. They were obviously have enough tenure in the major leagues. They can exercise those options when they are sent down or have been, in Blyer's case anyway, they're all season for the moment. Jackson Rutledge was optioned to Rochester from Washington. Red Wings are in Lehigh Valley next week, but the most important note here, Jips an absolute smashing week last week from James Wood, and he got the AAA Player of the Week in the International League last week for his efforts. So the number 1 player in the Nationals pipeline also got put into the MLB's top 5 pipeline as well, courtesy of last week's efforts.
I guess he needs to do a little more. Red Wings are below 500. Last week they were above 500.
And somehow they're still tied for 4th.
Yeah. I won't spoil it. Yeah. Just continue on.
Right, because Syracuse solely in 2nd, but everybody trailing Scranton still by 3.5 games at least. So
24-15. That's great progress for that team.
yeah. Syracuse really has, compared to last year, really turned around the ship, and gotta give some kudos. I mentioned the coaching staff a lot. You know, they probably, Dick Scott and those guys have probably really instilled their system within that organization at this point. So they have Iowa this week in Syracuse. The Iowa Cubs, they're in Scranton last week. The only note really with them on the roster at the moment, David Griffin was granted his release as well. He was DFA'd, outrighted, was able to take his release. Just of note, too, by the way, Syracuse now really balanced offensively. I know it's something we were talking about earlier in the year a little bit after as good as they were, kind of was everywhere offensively, but, you know, and this is where I got to give kudos to, you know, these major league guys, and it's kind of like Matt Adams last year in Rochester where, like, he could have taken his release at any year, but he hung around all year and did really well. You know, Ben Gamble's having a really good season for Syracuse right now. I know he leads the team in average at 325, so... you know, obviously, you know, it's probably a case of with him anyway. I feel like we might be seeing him in the New York Met uniform, but a veteran like that at this point, right, for him, he's got that veteran status now, doing as well as he is, kind of leading the pack and leading that organization. Luis Angel Acuna's really stepped up as well recently. You know, in the young prospect department, you know, the Syracuse Mets. That's a huge series next week. It really shapes up to be a huge series next week in Scranton.
Yeah, just looking at some of the numbers, the 4th best run differential, the hottest team in the East, 8-2 over their last 10. Just stuff we've never seen since we've had this podcast. We've seen a lot of losing, a lot of bad numbers. So it's nice to see. I mean, they're close to us. I think I'll still probably be a Scranton fan because that's the AAA team, but you know, it's good to see the local teams doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since, and I will admittedly open up the door here for when, you know, the New York Penn League had was existed, and we had teams in Auburn and Batavia, for example. It's really has been a number of years since a local team has kind of been doing what Syracuse has been doing. It's just kind of a nice breath of fresh air, to be quite honest, in that sense. So, but you mentioned, right, great to just have a local team be doing what they're doing, and also what Rochester's kind of. I know they're one game below 500, but the fact of the matter is, for where they were kind of last year as well, it's been a bit of a turnaround for them as well. So it's good. It's good to see good baseball being played locally at that level. So that will do it for Concrete Jungle for this week. Back at it again next Thursday. We'll recap everything, talk about the latest headlines and such. So until then, like, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff. We'll talk again next week.